breaking down all the biggest risks of real estate in 2025. I've been in real estate for over 30 years, built everything from fire stations to multifamily, over $425 million in deals. And in 2025, it's different. It's definitely not 2008. It's not 2021. It's worse in some ways, better in others, because the biggest risk we now have aren't obvious. It's not just rates. It's bad underwriting. It's over-leveraged operators that are affecting the market in unseen ways. It's capital stacks that don't cash flow. It's investors who are restless. And in this video, I'm breaking down the real risks of how to protect yourself before it's too late. Look, everybody's talking about how interest rates and inflation are changing the way that people underwrite. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They're not really changing the way that I underwrite. And if you go back to when I did my first deal in 2001, that deal I did at 9% interest. And that was the going interest rate. What changed from there to here is that interest rates have fluctuated, cap rates have fluctuated. But what I figured out early on is that interest rates and cap rates have a symbiotic relationship, meaning when interest rates go up, so do cap rates. And when they come down, well, cap rates follow. They should never be equal. They should never be on par. But sometimes that happens. And when that happens, you're in dangerous water. And a lot of people didn't understand that in 2021 and 2022. That's why deals got underwritten at buying it at a 3.5 cap and selling it at a 2.5 cap. Those were unrealistic because in order for it to sell at a 2.5 cap, in my book, interest rates would have had to have been at 1%, maybe as high as 1.5. So what you have to understand is the relationship between interest rates and cap rates. To remind everybody, when cap rates go up, the value of the property goes down. The capitalization rate simply refers to the amount of return you're anticipating getting from the purchase price of the property based on the income that's coming in. So if you're looking at a property that produces $1 million, a $10 million valuation would be for something that is doing a 10 cap. A $20 million valuation would be for something that somebody considered to be a 5 cap. These are very, very simple things to look at, and there's something that you need to consider. So when I learned that early on, when I started to see cap rates come down because interest rates were coming down, I followed that. I made sure that I kept separation. I made sure that the deals that I was penciling, I could see where if interest rates rose, cap rates were also going to rise, so my incoming cap rate and my outgoing cap rate were different. That means that when I bought the deal at a 5.5, I needed to make sure that I would be able to sell at a 6.5 and still make money for my investors. Remember, higher the cap rate, lower the sales price. So if that delta existed, it gave me a margin of error, which a lot of people seem to forget in the frenzy of the early 2020s. That's not a good way to structure a deal. If you're looking at a deal in 2025, you need to take that into consideration. You can't bet on interest rates going down. You can bet on interest rates that you can lock. Now, if you find a deal that works at today's interest rates, fantastic. Lock it for a long term because you can always redo the loan if interest rates fall enough that it makes financial sense for you. But if you're locked in for a long term, that means that if interest rates rise in 18 months, you're protected. And the longer you can protect yourself buys you the most runway to see the best returns, because a lot of people right now are finding themselves in a place where they're struggling with the deal and they have to sell it because it is in a place where it has to have a new loan put on it. And when you go to do that and interest rates are higher than you anticipated, your cash flow doesn't match, you've got to bring more equity to the deal. When you bring more equity to the deal, things go sideways because everybody gets diluted and nothing seems to work the same. Besides, finding new investors to come to the deal is not a good idea because it just gets sticky and it doesn't seem to work very well. Nobody likes a deal with a bunch of hair on it that's got some bad juju. They want to stay away from that. And I see investors making that mistake, and now they're trying to deal with their capital stack and they're trying to restructure and they're trying to come up with ways to make everything work, and it's hard. And when they can't come up with something, they're not creative, they're not able to come up with a solution, the bank has no choice but to foreclose on the property. That doesn't help anybody in the market because usually during that process, management leaves, your assets going down, they're taking whoever they can get. It really affects rents in the area, and that is the detriment of what's happening. Inflation, on the other hand, continues to be in a tailwind for us because as things continue to inflate, so do rents. The problem is we really need for paychecks to inflate. We need things to go up in that area, and when they don't, that makes it difficult for everyone. Here's a quick heads up. If all this risk makes your palms sweat, well, that's good. That means you're paying attention. Real estate isn't isn't supposed to be easy, but it doesn't have to be that hard. And that's why I put together a resource to help you avoid bad deals and bad partners. It's called the SRI Due Diligence Framework, and it's how I personally vet every single opportunity before it ever gets a dollar. If you're an investor and you're not using this, you're guessing, and guessing is gambling in real estate. The link's in the description, and we only give out 20 of these copies, so get yours right now before they disappear. You know, banks and private lenders are behaving a little differently in 2025. It's like they've got their wits about them again, and instead of lending all the money they possibly can get their hands on at whatever cap rate they need to make the deal work, because the interest rate doesn't have a DSCR or a debt service coverage ratio constraint in it, had left everybody a little punch drunk. But now they're starting to act like banks and lenders again, which means that you have to know your stuff when you go in there. You can't be looking to buy something at a 5 cap and put 6% financing on it and have a bank think that you're really intelligent about the deal. You've got to look at things from the bank's perspective and figure out what makes sense for the developer, the LPs, and the bank. And you've got to make sure that what you've got is downside protection, because banks are now looking at that again, that they didn't seem to do that in 2021. I saw people buying deals that had no operational experience, that were doing things that nobody in their right mind would loan millions of dollars to, but somehow these people were getting approved and buying deals. We can see who they are now because the tide's gone out and we see who's swimming naked. But I've entered and exited a lot of deals in several different markets, and what's changed from my approach to market selection is that I am even more particular about what I'm looking at, because the ones that have performed well over the last 18 months are on my list, and they've stayed on my list. And some that didn't perform so well in the last 4 or 5 years have fallen off of that list, because I really need to make sure that as the market comes back, we stay in areas that already exhibit strong growth and that have continued to do so, because those would be the ones that are going to perform like rock stars in 26, 27, and 28, because they all have the right dynamics going on in it. And here's another tip. I study a market for 6 to 9 months before I actually get involved in it. It's not like a deal comes across my desk and then I jump into a market. That's too much chasing shiny objects for me. I look at markets first, I find the ones I like, I study those so that when a deal comes along, I am able to move quickly and intelligently. I need to make sure that I understand what that market is, and then I can get into sub-markets, I can get into different product types, I can get into the different nuance of what's going on, but I have to understand the market so I'm not having a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm definitely not against some sort of timeline as far as I've got to learn the market because I only have 30 or 60 days of due diligence. Some of the things that we've spotted in the last couple of years is occupancy rates. Just because that's what it says on paper doesn't mean that that's how it turns out. I was actually looking at a deal in Tennessee. We found out that the occupancy rate on paper was very different than the physical occupancy, and we pulled out of that deal. And that was something where we were able to make a key adjustment because we understood the market. We understood that for some reason this particular unit had a higher occupancy in the submarket because we already knew the market, and we wound up saving our investors a ton of money because we didn't lose it. Remember, getting your money back is a win. Getting your money back with profits is a definite home run, and that's what we're shooting for.